Hey guys, hope final week's going well for you. Since I can't be there to go through my lesson demonstration, I'm going to upload a little video that explains the adaptions that I made throughout my lesson. So the first one that I had comes from Goldenberg, page 4, which is all about explaining the learning target and standards to each other and to make sure that the students can understand that via their L1. And so after I've gone through my explanation of the learning target and the objectives I want them to meet, I'll have students who are primarily in the L1 stage talk to each other using their L1 to make sure that each other understand what is expected out of them from me. And so this is just one way that Goldenberg says to use the L1 in the classroom. So I want students to be able to use that to each other to help foster understanding of what my expectation is of them. Goldenberg also says on page 4 that it's extremely important to build background connection and experiences, and we know this through any good lesson that teachers are going to do this. And so in my lesson, I talk about calculating the circumference and area of circles and finding radiuses and all that sorts of good information. And so I start my lesson by asking students about if they've ever been to a carnival, what carnival rides look like, and if they've ever wondered how far they've traveled on carnival rides, such as a Ferris wheel or the beloved Ring of Fire. And so by asking these connections, I want students to think about past experiences or knowledge that they have within this own content. And so by asking about carnivals and experiences like such that students do on their free time, they can use that experience of free time and bring it back into the classroom with them. As well as this, I'm going to use pictures of real life carnivals and carnival rides as my first initial calculations of circumference and areas, so students can visualize something that they've already experienced and been on and use that into the curriculum and knowledge and help support that meaning and make that happen for them. The next one I pulled from was Diaz, Rico, and Weed, page 60. And this is all about the development of CALP. So it's our cognitive academic language proficiency. And so before I even really start the lesson, I'm going to lay out all the CALP terminology and words that they're going to run across throughout the lesson. And so by clearly explaining these, and this is another time where I'll have students talk to each other in their L1 to make sure that they have the understanding of those words, because it's critical that they can use those words effectively and appropriately in the classroom and throughout assessment and throughout the whole lesson in general, and just build that CALP language, because if they see it in my classroom, I can almost promise that they're going to see it in their classroom. Another Diaz, Rico, and Weed, because I used a lot of the SEDI model to help my adaptions throughout this. And these are just connections that I'm going to help build under the SEDI model, which is frequent comprehension checks. And so that's, like I've said before, it's good with any lesson to continue to make sure your students are understanding and reteach if necessary for them, just to make sure that they understand that. And under the connection parts of the SEDI model, we also have the content language objectives, which I have already spoken about, is making sure that that is clear and the students can understand what is expected of them to learn throughout the lesson. Another part of the bridging under the Diaz, Rico, and Weed SEDI model is that bridging, the building examples from student lives. And so that all ties back into using that past experience about going to the carnival, seeing carnival rides, maybe even seeing on movies if they haven't been there. That's something that I believe that all students can, in one way or another, can build the connection to and have previous understanding about. Another part under the SEDI model is the comprehensibility, which is the Diaz, Rico, and Reed reading that we had, is the pictures and graphs to help guide their learning. And so I know I've already mentioned it, but using pictures of real life carnivals to help build that background experience, so my students can actually see and visualize what I'm doing and how to calculate that based off something that they can pull from real life, which is awesome, I think. Another demonstration under the connections model and comprehensibility under SEDI is the modeling. And so I'm going to start out by modeling it, doing it myself, showing step-by-step directions how to calculate for circumference and area of circles in my classroom. But eventually I want to get to the point where they are going to guide me through it, where I'm not going to help them at all in calculating the circumference and area. I'm going to ask them to give me step-by-step directions. So I want to do this to make sure that they are understanding it and the classroom has a good grasp of it, because when they go on their individual work, that's where they'll have time to work together, work in peers, work in partners to make sure that they can understand it before they eventually get to the formal assessment where they're going to have to do it all on their own. Then also throughout the lesson, under the interactions part of the SEDI model, we have the student to teacher interaction, which just goes along the lines of how they're going to guide me through one of the problems step by step without my assistance to know that I understand what they're doing. And as well as this, we're going to have plenty of student to student engagement, and that comes from where they're going to explain the learning targets to each other in their L1, as well as going over the Shoup language and helping each other on the initial worksheet that's going to be asked of them to complete after my teaching demonstration or portion of the lesson. Another section under the interactions is just the re-representation of knowledge. And so I finished my lesson by having students go around the school and find 10 circles and then calculate circumference and area. And throughout here, there will be more student to teacher interaction and student to student interaction, as I'll be going around with them and they're going to be working together to calculate these bigger task items and circles they're going to find out of school. I think it's a great way for them to get out of the classroom and see how they can use this in a real life situation where they'll be kind of on their own outside the classroom working on this. Kind of a fun way to keep them engaged, because anytime students get out of the classroom, things start to spike up a little bit, that's for sure. Then just some continued things that I'm going to use throughout my lesson for my students, which teachers should use throughout all their lessons, whether there's ELL students or normal students, is positive teacher attitude. You got to believe that all your students want to learn and can't learn. You can't come in with a negative belief that students don't want to be here and that they don't want to learn. There's no enjoyment being here. You got to have that belief that they want to be there. Another one is obviously clear communication. You got to be able to speak clear and cut out the use of idioms in your classroom while you're teaching. I know it's difficult, but it's one thing that teachers have to do, and I will do throughout my lesson, as well as slow speech rate. There's no race. There's no race to get to the end of the lesson. No race to move on to the next unit. Be slow in your speech rate. Be deliberate in what you're saying, and make sure students are understanding what is going on in your class and what is expected of them. So that's what I got for you guys. Hope you guys have a good finals week and you guys end off the semester in a good way, and hope you all have a good summer. Thank you.